Matt. It's good to see you again.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah. So how are you doing today?
Doing okay. Just having some kind of conflict issues at home with my partner.
Okay.
So like we've talked about in the past, like I have issues with depression, and I fall into like depression and stuff. Like I kind of isolate, and so that's kind of what's going on now. And I don't notice it, but I'm having a hard time communicating with my partner, kind of how I'm feeling or anything. I'm just kind of pushing her away.
Okay.
So I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what to do. It's just like almost as soon as like a conflict comes up, I just completely, withdraw from the situation and walk away, and nothing ever gets resolved. And I can feel the actual resentments in the air, but I don't know how to fix it.
Okay. When you say resentments, is this resentments that you're feeling towards her, or that she's starting to build towards you?
Build towards me. Like I can feel the tension, because like I really can't feel, just because like I can't feel the like I'm not building a resentment or tension. Like I'm getting irritated because I can't talk to her about these. You know what I mean? Because I don't know the right words to get out.
Yeah.
And especially kind of identifying like my feelings. Just having issues just communicating. And it seems like such a simple task to do, and it just seems like it's so much effort.
To actually be able to have those conversations, to communicate with
Right.
her.
Like just so much thinking power, so much everything. So it's just like, rather than dealing with the situation, I avoid it. And I know just from my past, like that makes it worse. But I've never been able to like address the issue or be able to learn to effectively communicate in states like this.
Yeah. And so when you say the issue, or when you use the term, I think you talked about conflict before as well. What are the sort of things that you're avoiding? When you say that you go and isolate, or that you walk away and kind of leave the situation, what sort of situations does that come up with?
It's almost like everyday things. Starting to kind of just like not, ironically, like take care of myself, take care of the house. I'm feeling like overwhelmed with school, with work, with practicum, with relationships. Like it's just like my plate's overflowing, and so like the conflicts are just, it's not like super relational conflicts. It's not like cheating or anything like that. It's dishes, housework, being emotionally available, like just simple things that should be like everyday tasks just seem monumental.
Yeah.
And so like the actual monumental tasks, I feel like I'm on autopilot, just doing what I need to do. And I know we've talked about that autopilot before.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
it's just, so all the complex tasks are being taken care of, but all the simple tasks are just being avoided.
Yeah. And I'm curious, does it feel like it's kind of been building? I think often if we have, even if it is small stuff and it's not big stuff, if there's things that we're regularly not addressing, have you noticed that it's kind of been, that tension's been building?
Yeah, it's definitely compounding. And so now it seems like a conflict or like an argument starts almost over nothing. And I think it's because she's getting frustrated and I'm getting frustrated because I can tell that she's frustrated, but I don't know how to address her frustration because I'm frustrated, and it's just like a hard situation to be in.
Yeah.
And so like this is a good relationship and it has been good. I just don't, I don't want it to end. That's also a fear that I have, is like with my past and everything like that, when I get like this, it seems like everybody just bails, And so like that's playing into it, and it's almost like treading water with weights on my feet. You know what I mean? Like it's just like barely keeping my head above water.
Yeah.
And so like I just don't know how to deal with it. And the easiest way to deal with it is to just almost disappear. You know what I mean? Like emotionally, like inside my head is usually where I go.
Yeah. And you've kind of described it a little bit, but I wonder if you can kind of paint that picture. What does it look like when you shut down or disappear? Because I think you've talked about, like, you don't live in a really large space, and so will you leave the apartment? Will you go out on the porch? Will you go to your room?
So
what do you do?
There's a couple things that I do. One of them is I just kind of like sit in this one particular spot on my bed and like look at Facebook or play games on my phone. The other thing I do is I get lost in video games or TV, because it's really just kind of mindless activity where I don't have to address anything that's going on. It's just literally mind-numbing entertainment. And so again, I know that builds on top of the resentment for her towards me, because it's just like, well, he has time for video games, but he doesn't have time for me. So it's just, and then, like, I don't think she really completely understands like my point of view, and I'm not asking her to, you know what I mean? Just a little bit of understanding, and it's almost like a little empathy will go a long way rather than being contemptuous, you know. And that's it. I think, and I know that's asking a lot for her, you know, to kind of understand. But I mean, rather than coming at me, you know, with the argument, you know, be like, what's going on? Because I have a hard time talking about my feelings. So, and that's the male thing to do, but I don't do it on purpose. I just shut down. So
and it sounds like you've talked about this has been a pattern for you a lot in most of your relationships.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And it kind of spirals to this point where you're feeling overwhelmed, and then it's just easier just to push it away.
And that's the thing, is like, for some reason I always push my relationships away rather than the external stuff. And I don't know why. Like, you know, like, human contact and relationships have always been important to me, but yet they're the first thing I cut. So, but I do well in school, I do well at work, I do well at practicum, I don't do well at home. And so
that's the part that's kind of getting put to the side. So I'd be curious, Matt, you know, from your perspective, what would you like to see change? You know, if we had to kind of make some goals around this as far as where we want to go from here to start addressing some of this stuff, what would you feel like are kind of the main things that you would want to see different?
I think one of the biggest things that I could actually use is being able to express myself.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that I have an issue with expressing myself is the judgment too. Maybe not the male stereotype, like, oh, he's the sissy la la, like he's expressing his feelings, but being able to be like, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling depressed, or, you know, like, I just being able to say how I feel and attach words to the feelings, because most of the time I don't know how I'm feeling, you know, like I'm just feeling pushed down. And I know there's feelings behind that, and even now, like, I can't think of words to describe those feelings, you know? And so I think being able to at least get it out in the open and being able to talk about how I feel kind of would be like a big stress relief. And I think it would help her understand where I'm coming from, and kind of we can meet in the middle and just kind of go out. You know, and I think being able to communicate with her, like, how I feel.
Okay. And so I'm hearing a couple different things, right? Before, you're talking about how sometimes it just feels overwhelming to even start the conversation, right? And so part of the challenge that you're coming up against is, you know, whether or not you're even willing to have that conversation in the moment, you know, when you're feeling overwhelmed, or whether or not it's easier just to avoid it. And then what you're describing now is even having the skills to do that. If you were going to make that choice, having the skills to actually communicate to her, and really, it sounds like even to yourself a little bit, like what you're feeling, being able to identify those emotions, being able to express that to somebody else so that they understand what's going on for you.
Yeah, I think the two kind of go hand in hand, is because I don't have the skills to talk to her. I just don't even start it, because it is like a huge task to try and like think of the words and like where I'm coming from. So definitely those two combined just kind of make it where I'm at, you know?
Yeah, you know, and part of it, the challenge with this sometimes is that frequently the only time that we actually try to figure out how to express our feelings are when it gets to the point where they're already fairly large, right? And so I've waited, I've waited until I have this moment where I could sit down and I'm feeling scared, and I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I'm feeling frustrated or hurt. And to be able to express that to somebody in a really heightened times can be really challenging. It can be really overwhelming.
Yeah, and I can definitely feel it in my body when like I want to start, but I don't. You know, like I feel shaky and anxious and everything like that.
And so I think something that can kind of help with that sometimes is to start practicing these sort of skills of identifying emotions and being able to express them at times when it maybe doesn't feel so big, where it doesn't feel so intense and scary, you know? And maybe it's something that you can start working up to a little bit. And you know, and I think honestly a good place to start, and sometimes people think this is kind of silly, but I think it can be a really good place, is we can print you off just kind of a basic feelings chart, right? And you know, it's like, oh, okay, maybe this is something we we do with children or that sort of thing. But the reality is that I think for many people, emotionally, and our ability to develop into how to describe and express our feelings really still is at a very childlike level a lot of the time. And so being able to start at that place where I can recognize what my emotion is and actually put a word to it, like you're talking about. Rather than just this abstract concept, because I'm sure you can feel it.
Yeah.
And you know what it is. But
Or even just a general, like even at, like that's even, like I'm feeling sad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there are so many different ways of feeling sad, and so I think that's the thing too. Is like I don't have the exact word I'm looking for. I'm just sad. And it's not good enough for what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like for me.
So one other thing that I hear you saying right now is that it sounds like you're maybe able to pull up kind of the more general words, frequently for men, anger, frustration, sadness sometimes. As men, typically, we aren't allowed a lot of different emotions. Happiness, horniness, anger, sadness. It's pretty much all we got. But as you're talking about, those don't quite capture what's going on a lot of the time. A lot of times it's more nuanced, or it's mixed up, or those may just be the ways that we're expressing it. And so there's a couple things I would love for us to do as far as kind of you being able to become more aware and to build some awareness around your emotions. Is one, we'll print you off a feelings chart and kind of maybe at various times through the day, maybe we could pick some specific times that work for you, when you can have a little bit of time to be with yourself, and maybe at lunchtime during your lunch break at work, or in between classes, or sometime in the evening, maybe a few times a day where you can sit down and just in that moment be able to look at this chart and be able to think about, okay, what's going on for me right now? And maybe at first what you'll find is that you're only able to identify some of the bigger emotions, right? The broad things, like, I know that I've just been feeling frustrated all morning. This person at work said something that I didn't like, and so I'm feeling really frustrated about that. And so what I'd like you to do is just to write that down, right? But then what I want you to do after that is to try to think about what is really going on behind that, right? And this is going to be the challenging part. This will take us some time and some kind of processing and being able to look at practicing if we can identify what's really going on behind that. Because as you've talked about, a lot of the time it's not just this big broad emotion, but even being able to identify what some of the more nuanced underlying stuff is, right? Okay. And so let's take the example of when your partner is feeling frustrated with you, right? Mm-hmm. And you come home, or she comes home, and the dishes aren't done. You can tell that she's kind of angry, right? And she wants to say something to you. And so you go and sit down on the couch and you start playing video games and you just avoid it, okay? You talked about before about that can feel, it's kind of like an overwhelming point, or you just don't want to deal with it. I'm wondering right now if you could think about, like, what are some of the other things that you're feeling in that moment when you're feeling overwhelmed?
I think one of the biggest things is, like, I can feel like her frustration, and I can feel frustrated, and I can feel the anger and everything like that, and it's almost easier to just, like we talked about, just shut down and not deal, because what I'm afraid of is like that anger and frustration coming out as anger and frustration, and not being able to be like, like, this is what's going on, and just starting a huge fight over dishes.